It's time for part 5 of the Star Wars Emperor at War Rebels campaign. We set things to easy as we engaged a powerful enemy fleet to see if it would make things easier, and indeed it kind of did, although the use of assault frigates now perhaps is helping as well. We were able to stop an Imperial counterattack using only freely spawned garrison units in a cheeky move, allowing our main fleet and army to go and attack Mon Calamari behind our front line. There we were successful again thanks to the use of the locals as squid shields, preventing our men from taking losses. Then there was a bit of fighting over Bothawui, and we went on to auto-resolve in a very costly fashion Kessel. So now it's just Wayland behind us, and then our front line will actually look nice and stable. A bit of spying with C-3PO reveals that there was actually a substantial enemy fleet there, so we're going to send most of our stuff to go and try and take it down. Well, you might also note, I am now starting to have other fleets defending the front line at the same time, so I'm doing this a little bit less haphazardly now. We moved up towards the enemy space station without much resistance, but then when we got close we were absolutely swarmed by fighters. You can see on the mini-map that they just have complete dominance all over the place. I'm trying to keep my bombers somewhat out of the action, while the enemy's fighter class ships just fly around our fleet and get shot by these smaller lasers. We've got a couple of corvettes there which very quickly work through those enemy bombers in particular. The only problem is that they do drop a whole load of bombs before we take them out. So a bit of damage, but overall not too bad. Now we just have to keep slogging because they're going to come wave after wave but will eventually stop. The issue is that the enemy have a lot of Victory class Star Destroyers, something like 7 or 8 right there, and many of them are engaging us all at the same time right now. And our frigates just can't really stand up to them. We're taking a lot of damage. That Nebulon B just about sneaks away with its engines destroyed, but overall it's going to be a hard fight just in terms of the slogging match between the larger ships. We lose a Nebulon B there, and I think we've already lost a couple of corvettes at this point as well, and most of the bombers as well, taken out by the still swarming enemy fighters. All we can do in return is try and warp in additional frigates to just sit where the ones who just got destroyed were and take up the fight as well. We do still have a numbers disadvantage when it comes to frigates though, so we can't just go trading one for one. I needed to get something better going here, so I started moving everything away from the space station to perhaps draw away a couple of enemies on their own to get a better fight. You can see though that we're under constant attack as we move away because our ships can't fire backwards and the enemy are facing forwards at us, so that trailing assault frigate takes tons of damage, and eventually I'm forced to turn around, not retreating quite as far away as I would have liked. Not only because we were taking so much damage, but because the maps are tiny. This is about as far away from the space station as I can actually get at this point. Anyway, so we just turn around and start fighting, and it's becoming a bit all or nothing at this point since our reinforcement pool is dwindling. We don't have any big ships in it, so we need to take down the enemy's Victory cruisers with what we have right now. We don't have anything else to counter them available. We do manage to take out the couple of them closest to us, and then we can push on a bit closer to the space station to take out more hard points. Another Victory cruiser goes down there. Still more fighters are being spammed from the space station's hangar, but we've got a couple of corvettes managing to keep most of the damage off of our ships. These assault frigates, by the way, are very good at tanking damage from the enemy, so they seem to save our Nebulon Bs from being destroyed even when they're on the verge of death, just because they have very big shields. The game describes them, I think, as being a attack-focused ship, but actually in my experience it's the opposite. They appear to have the exact same weaponry as the Nebulon Bs, they just have a lot more health, so really they're just tanky versions of them. Anyway, as you can see, we eventually win. The battle calms down a lot towards the end because once you've destroyed lots of hard points on the space station and enemy ships, they can't really fire back at you, so victory becomes inevitable. But we did lose the better part of our fleet, perhaps half of it, and most of the big ships as well, so that is a shame. In this case, we can send everything that survives back to the front line to defend, while some ground forces go to take Wayland. There's actually a force defending it, and we learn after a long freeze, as the game is outraged by my attacking of the planet, that they have AT-ATs here, and the small army I sent to take it won't actually be enough. I thought they had level 0 defenses from my previous spying, but I think it's actually just a trait of this planet that you can't see what's on it. So I auto-resolved and lost that battle, not losing very much because I didn't send very much, and fortunately taking out the AT-ATs. So that means it'll be easier to attack next time, but I am going to have to rebuild that army. Fortunately, as I said, it was only a couple of units, so we can get them back pretty soon and get a bigger army indeed, so things actually go our way. Amid the flurry of seemingly random Imperial activity that we're spying on, I saw lots of ships going towards Ryloth and thought, is this the beginning of an attack on Nal Hutta? I was reluctant to move my fleet there because Bothawui only has a level 1 space station, but looks like I should have, because it did get attacked. Normally it's hard to determine anything actually coming from all of the random movements the Empire make, because the AI is just doing loads of crazy micro with its garrisons, but in this case it looks like it was actually possible to predict that attack if I was watching extremely closely. Anyway, so in this battle we do have a level 3 space station which will spawn fighters, bombers and corvettes for us to use. I've also got a gunship and a marauder cruiser in a small regular fleet to help us out. The gunship was destroyed right away because I didn't have enough micro skill to get it out of the line of fire there since I was microing all the fighters. But anyway, as for the fight, we're going to do the same sort of thing we saw in the past, where I just try and use all these free units to bring down as much stuff as possible. My fighters out in the distance there are trying to hunt down and take out some of the long-range missile cruisers, which themselves are completely wrecking my space station. I've already lost more than half the health and all the shields, but a couple of acclamator frigates that came into attack were destroyed by our bombers and the guns on our space station, and that victory cruiser there sitting there in trouble getting shot from behind. Eventually that guy gets taken down as well. They did bring over a corvette to actually support their frigate after a while, so that puts a little spanner in the works since it can bring down my bombers, but I had so many bombers, and because they're infinitely respawning, it ultimately doesn't matter. I sent a corvette to try and hunt down the missile cruisers as well, because there were quite a lot of them out there occasionally appearing on the minimap, since you can only see them when they're firing. But it ultimately failed. You can see an acclamator was able to find and destroy my corvette, at least at the same time I could send my bombers against it and take out all of its hard points, start getting rid of those pesky weapons. The enemy's missile cruisers are destroying those bombers pretty rapidly, but my fighters will go after the missile cruisers. They'll easily win. There's the corvette respawning once again, and soon the bombers who we lost will be back as well. And just generally, we've got this in the bag now. The acclamator comes closer to the space station and gets destroyed by our relentless bombing. Then it's just the missile cruisers, and this group of fighters and bombers is easily enough to take them down. Once you're close to them, they can't attack you, and we can move pretty fast, so we can get close to them, suffice to say. And there we have it, the battle was won. We lost only that gunship at the start, the enemy lost all sorts of things. We did though get our space station de-leveled by the damage done to it, so we have to re-buy the upgrade to level 3, which is quite expensive, so that probably wasn't the best trade ever, ultimately, if you take that into account. But still, we've stopped their fleet and that's what matters. Now we're going to play a little bit of Imagine the Gameplay, because as you can see, or not see as it were, there was about half an hour of gameplay footage where the video was just black screen. The audio's still there, so we can guess what happens from what we can hear. It sounds like I fought a land battle. I think that was me capturing Wayland. Then after that, there was a space battle. Not quite sure what this was, but it was most probably something around Ryloth, because as we'll see in a moment, I did attack Ryloth later on. There was then some more sounds from a land battle. I think this was me capturing, I can't remember what it's called, the place where the Twi'leks come from, that planet, and the Twi'leks were just tanking all of the Empire's fires. It was actually quite easy. And now here we are, when the gameplay actually comes back into the recording and is here properly. You can see we've taken Ryloth, we've taken Shola over there, that must be the Twi'lek place, and indeed we've taken Wayland as well. So sorry for that time skip, nothing we can do there. We're now in the future when things are going better, and indeed our front line is now just 2 planets, both with a fleet on them, so things are nice and stable at last. This is what I was looking for. And by this point, by the way, we are back on medium difficulty since we've recovered from the very difficult early phase of the game. I've also now discovered that we can actually recruit loads of smugglers using certain buildings, and these smugglers allow us to spy on enemy planets in the same way as C-3PO. So over time, we're just going to put one on every planet so that we can see all of the Empire stuff, and this makes planning what we're going to do in the game significantly easier. As for what we're going to do right now, I'm going to attack Geonosis. I was tactically waiting there so I could attack just as we saw enemy fleets leaving the planet, so maybe it's a bit weaker now than it was 5 seconds ago. Very interesting how fast the game goes. You do need to pay very close attention to what's going on to really min-max things. Now, as we saw there, there's a laser on Geonosis that can actually shoot up at our fleet, which is going to cause some problems for us because we can't do anything about it. It's down on the surface and we're just going to get shot constantly, meaning we want this battle to be as quick as possible. The enemy fleet is actually mostly corvettes, so they come at us with a huge wave of corvettes, and I've put my frigates out in front to hopefully take them down while my fighters are hiding in the corner, my bombers I should say. We moved on, facing even more corvettes and just trying to tank their rapid fire. They're glowing red because they're using their power to weapons ability that makes them shoot really quickly. And we are actually taking some damage just to the sheer amount of fire we're taking, but even more so to that hypervelocity gun. It takes out one of our assault frigates. They also discovered my bombers in the corner. I was going to try and hide them in a different corner. I eventually just waypointed them to go around the outside of the map and try and take out the shield generator on the enemy's space station. Anyway, so yes, we want to end this battle as soon as possible, because every 30 to 40 seconds that hypervelocity gun fires and does lots of damage. We're going to have to use a decent amount of our reinforcements here. There, they get a hit on a Nebulon B and it almost destroys it in one hit, that gun, so very powerful. The rebels have a roughly equivalent thing that I haven't had a chance to use yet, the ion cannon. I think it's the same ion cannon we see in Empire Strikes Back, where it just disables ships rather than destroying them, so perhaps less useful. We lose a Nebulon B there to that hypervelocity gun, very annoying. Now we're out of heavy reinforcements, we need to bring this station down. Luckily, by this late point in the battle, the station was all but dead. It was really just the hypervelocity gun constantly blowing stuff up. That was a worry. In this case, not going to take too long to get rid of the station. The battle actually annoyingly went on for a bit more because there was a transport ship somewhere on the map that had eluded me so far, which was still alive, but we destroyed it before we got shot again by the hypervelocity gun. So there are our losses, pretty decent, but at least we've now captured a frontline position that's a choke point. The enemy have to attack Geonosis or Bothawui to get anywhere into our side of the map, so this is a very efficient defensive position we've got right now. Next up, we need to make the ground assault on Geonosis, and from the icons we can tell that this is quite literally the most heavily defended place in the universe, so perhaps some difficulty to be expected. The game froze again when I tried to make this move. Eventually it did load in. The Geonosans are on our side, and that's going to be incredibly helpful. They immediately take one of the capture points for us, so we get some good map control. And as I move through the centre and discover the enemy have AT-ATs here, they're now going to come in very useful as fodder. Our tanks can get out of there, and to avoid being pursued by the AT-ATs, the Geonosians will tank their fire while the actual tanks go around to the top left corner of the map, where other Geonosians have sacrificed themselves to let us know there is an Empire base. So we'll attack the less heavily defended one to remove the buildings that are spawning enemy units, while these Geonosians here just have a difficult time. The buildings that are spawning them can be easily destroyed by the AT-ATs, but in this case they only destroyed one of the two there, so they'll just keep respawning right in front of the enemy and drawing their attention. My tank attack goes pretty well. We get into the base, taking out a few AT-STs, and then start working on the buildings. While the number of AT-STs they'll have to fight is very large, it's mostly one at a time because they're spawning right into the fight, so with lots of tanks there and sending some rocket launcher guys too, we can take them down. Our bombers are able to attack the AT-AT now that it's outside of the enemy's dome shield, so our Geonosians sacrificing themselves allows us to spot them and get attacks on AT-ATs that would otherwise be out of our line of sight. So again, very useful sacrifices they are making. We work our way through that base in the top left, but more things are still running at us, so they're still respawning units, meaning they have another base, and indeed it's just in the top right in that little space you can see on the mini-map. So we need to go and check out what's over there as well. For that purpose, I grab a couple of units of Geonosians, of course, to just run over, or fly over as it were, and have a look, since it doesn't matter if they die, and they actually don't encounter resistance. We do discover one enemy building there, and there are plenty more. What we're going to do is be incredibly cheeky and capture the build pad that the Imperials aren't using, and now we can make an anti-vehicle turret there, so any AT-STs wandering around in this area inside their own base will now be attacked. We can also use the spotting power of the Geonosians to bomb these buildings since they are outside of the bubble shield. After a while, my plan pays off here. An ATST actually does come to try and stop the Geonosians, and boom, we take it down with the vehicle turret. That is incredibly cheeky. I bet the Empire are very annoyed with those pesky rebels right now, and the Geonosians continue to slowly work their way through that enemy base. They're actually quite powerful with their attacks and are able to just shoot the buildings until they explode. Now, another sacrifice-style tactic came to mind. I've called down a unit of these scout tanks, which we've seen before aren't very useful, but they're kind of fast, so I thought maybe we can actually do something here. We can just run through the enemy position so that we know what it is. We see lots of tanks, ATSTs, and another AT-80, spot a couple of buildings, and of course the shield generators there, but we knew it already. I was looking here below the enemy base to see if there were more buildings, but there weren't, so that was good to see. Now that we've got that intel, we start coming up with a plan of attack. My first attempted plan was this one. I'm going to grab all of my scout tanks and do a similar tactic, but this time we're going to run past the enemy defenses right into the middle of their base, because if we can take out their shield generator, we can then bomb the AT-80. This will allow us to hopefully destroy it by just spotting it with more Geonosians, and generally not have to risk our ground army going to attack that powerful enemy. The shield generator is actually very weak. It has like the same amount of health as an infantry squad, so these scout tanks can actually damage it despite being usually useless. But in this case the enemy actually did kind of try to stop them with a couple of units, and that is enough to actually stop them. So I had to call off the attack. I wanted to see if I could get them out alive. Only one of them is going to make it of the three who went in, but that's better than I expected, to be honest. I was quite willing to lose all of them in this case because I still had one scout tank left over in the corner, which would cause all the others to respawn after the battle. Now I'm just going to have to attack normally. The sneaky moves are kind of out the window. Well, you could say this is a sneaky move. I send a huge wave of Geonosians to soften the enemy up, destroying their turrets and killing several units. Then all of my rocket launcher guys just go and spam the AT-80 to death. I lost my artillery along the way to that flank attack from that light tank, but apart from that, things are going to go well here. These rocket launcher guys will now easily take out the remaining ATSTs and tanks. And as for the enemy's infantry units who are still spawning from somewhere, we can hit them with our own tanks, and of course the Geonosians, how could we forget? They've respawned after their recent deaths, so we'll throw them in to take out enemy infantry, and this push was successful. We get into the enemy base, just a couple of buildings here, so they couldn't spawn much to stop us. The battle did go on for a while after that because there were more buildings I hadn't spotted, but there we go. Now at the very end of the fight, if you look at the minimap, in the top left, that red bar is the enemy's power generator for the shields. I hadn't discovered it. If I had, I could have taken it out ages ago and removed the shields, allowing us to just freely attack the AT-80s with bombers, or the entire enemy base with bombers, and win that easily. So it's a shame I didn't actually see it. Although, we didn't take any losses in that fight. The Geonosians took extreme casualties, but we lost no units. So for a battle against like a max level enemy base, that actually went outrageously well. The Empire are clearly planning a counterattack because there's a gigantic fleet gathering at Tatooine that, thanks to C-3PO, we know about. The game actually kindly says Imperial fleet approaching when it comes to attackers this time, so that's nice. Gives you 2 seconds of warning. Fortunately, we were there already to stop them, although that said, their fleet's pretty big. Looks like it might even be bigger than ours, kind of hard to tell. Perhaps about the same. From their composition though, things aren't so dire because they've just absolutely spammed corvettes and missile cruisers. They've only got 4 frigates, and we've got something like 4 frigates and the space station with bombers, so we're going to be able to win the capital ship fight at the very least. The enemy rush in and start getting blown up, but the whole time there are just torpedoes coming in and blowing up all over the place, just constantly just wiping out our fighters in fell swoops. And all of the corvettes they've brought will actually do the same thing, since we can't so easily just spam bombers against a frigate. Like right here where I was like, just send the bombers to attack that Victory class frigate, but there was a corvette right in front of me that I wasn't paying attention to, and we lost all those bombers instantly. Anyway, some of my fleet got kind of stuck behind the space station, so I'm trying to micro it around it to get into position. While doing so, I missed the fact that Ray Antilles is out on his own, being absolutely annihilated, and he basically dies, but I give him the full power to engines ability and try to get out of there, and we just about escape with like 1 pixel of health, so that was pretty lucky. Anyway, time to call in our reinforcements since all our stuff's getting blown up, and now we'll continue on. Most of what we've lost so far has been just Y-wings. Our frigates are still afloat, as it were. The enemy sends a victory frigate in to attack the space station on its own, and it just gets focus fired down by everything and destroyed, so that's what we like to see. And our assault frigates are still hanging around, tanking everything, trying to draw the torpedoes into them since they can just take so much punishment. We want the torpedoes to not hit the space station so we can keep respawning things, basically. Another victory frigate comes over and gets destroyed in a similar fashion to the last one. Not sure what the AI is doing with these attacks. I think they're really trying to focus down the space station rather than our fleet, and are just ignoring the fact our fleet is all around the space station. Now, with most of the enemy's fleet destroyed, it was just all of those missile cruisers, so suddenly things will turn around very quickly. We just need to send our fleet out to find the missile cruisers and attack them, and at this point they'll stop attacking us, mostly because we're too close to them. This was finally a chance to use the cinematic camera, because I didn't need to micro anymore. We can just do attack moves in various directions and hit everything. So here are some shots of not especially much happening. Eventually we win the fight. There goes the last one. By the end of this, we actually didn't lose any of our frigates or capital ships somehow, because every time they were near death I was moving them up into the top right corner to stay out of the fight, and this just means everything gets repaired after the fight and we're back to pretty much where we were before. So we're ready to attack the enemy, and they're now weak after losing all of those ships, so this is ideal. It looks like here you actually can't go to Tatooine from Geonosis according to that circle around the planet. Someone said at some point that the circle represents how far you can jump. Maybe there's just one pixel on Tatooine. It looks like there might be actually, and that's why you can do it. But if that is how it works, then I think it should mean Naboo can't quite jump to Geonosis, so by spamming everything onto Tatooine, as I'm doing now, we're again forcing the enemy through a space choke point, if such a thing exists, since they have to attack us here. Anyway, we'll need to take the planet. It's got decent defences, but in this case I couldn't be bothered to fight the battle. The land battles aren't especially fun to do, mainly in my opinion because the camera is so close to the ground. You can't really tell what's going on a grand scale on those tiny confined maps. Anyway, so I auto-resolved it, is the long story short there, and lost just about everything, all but one unit in fact. Those land auto-resolves are so harsh. I think we probably could have done it for free if we did it manually, but now we've lost all of our land army again, but still we'll get another one. This has been a very attrition heavy campaign for the rebels. Everyone in this galaxy will be dead by the end of this, but we might just be free.